somebody who's been on the left of the Labour Party and has been involved in left-wing politics within the Labour Party over quite a number of years now. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at the LRC again. I don't know if everybody here knows about the LRC, but the Labour Representation Committee was named after the original LRC that was founded in 1900 and led to the formation of the Labour Party. And of course, the Labour Party was created because we needed a voice for the working class in Parliament. The previous party who had represented and who wished to represent the working class, the Whigs, the Liberals, simply weren't good enough. So socialists and trade unionists came together to create a party that would stand candidates. And on Saturday, we had the centenary of Labour's first MP, Keir Hardie, who of course came from Ayrshire. He died 100 years ago on last Saturday. And I think there's an awful lot about Keir Hardie that I think we need to think about, because lots of things about our current leader remind me of in many ways of Keir Hardie. A meeting I was at last night, which was the launch of a book, which is a series of essays about Keir Hardie. Neil Finlay, MSP, was there as well. One of the speakers from the floor said he'd been at an event which was fundraising for Palestine, and he'd asked Jeremy Corbyn if he would donate his shoes to put on auction to raise money for Palestine. So he gave up his shoes and they went on auction and he cycled home. And you know, it really reminded me of a story that I read when I was about 14 years old about Keir Hardie. It was in a book that's now out of print, I think, by a man called Emrys Hughes, who was a Labour MP in Ayrshire, I think from 1946 onwards. And he was the son-in-law of Keir Hardie. And in his book, he told this story about Keir Hardie meeting a woman who didn't have a coat. And Keir Hardie had a coat. He had one coat. And this woman didn't have a coat, and he felt that her need was greater than his. So he gave her his coat. And I think that humanity and that compassion is something the Labour Party has forgotten about. And I think with Jeremy Corbyn, as leader, that's something that I think people are going to start realising is the core of our values, the core of our beliefs, and the core of what we who call ourselves socialists believe the world should be about. I've always taken the view that socialism is a consistent form of democracy. That democracy isn't about having a vote every 5 years. That simply is not good enough. What democracy is about is all of us as individuals, no matter our gender, no matter where we live in the world, having an equal stake and living in a society where we have as much control as possible over every aspect of the world in which we live. That's a vision. That's something we strive for. And as socialists, we campaign in the here and now. We are realists, we're pragmatists. But that doesn't mean that we throw our values out of the window. That doesn't mean that we accept a neoliberal ideology that has been created by those who have the wealth and power, not just in this country, but internationally, and who are the real people that make these decisions that affect all of our lives. I almost was in tears listening to John McDonnell today, because I've worked with John McDonnell for many, many years, and I've probably heard him make hundreds of speeches, and I've probably been in hundreds of meetings with him. And it is a massive achievement for all of us that we have elected Jeremy Corbyn with such a massive mandate to be leader of the Labour Party, and that he has appointed Jeremy Corbyn. John McDonnell to be his shadow chancellor. And in case anybody has got any doubts, John is the correct appointment. Because both John and Jeremy understand the compassion and the humanity that our movement is about. And our job over the coming days, the coming months, and the coming years is to go out there in every community up and down this country and explain to people how another world is possible, how we need economic policies which are about the interests of people in every community in the United Kingdom. George Osborne keeps telling us that we've had an economic recovery, but the reality is very few people are sharing in that recovery, and very few parts of this island are sharing in that recovery. So what we need to do is we need to go out and explain why we need economic policies that are about jobs and growth, economic policies that are about making sure that the wealth we created is shared far more evenly throughout this country and amongst the peoples that live in this country. We need to go out and to persuade people that austerity doesn't work, that it's a political choice and it isn't necessary. We haven't won that argument yet because we haven't had that argument yet. Constituency MP, people would come to my constituency surgeries and say that they appreciated that cuts were necessary, but some particular service that they cared about wasn't the right place to make those cuts. The reality, of course, is that those cuts are not necessary. They are a political choice. And what we need to do over the coming period of time is to build a movement that's strong enough and big enough to take on that ideology, to take on those challenges, that's educated enough to understand what's going on in the world and to recognise that we can do things in a very different way. I honestly believe, with Jeremy as leader of this party and John McDonnell as the shadow chancellor, we're in the best position to do that in England, in Wales, and indeed in Scotland too. And I tell you, if you're not convinced now that the Labour Party needs to change, look at what's happened in Scotland. Because those election results didn't take place over the 4 weeks of a general election campaign or even over the 2 years of a referendum campaign. Those election results had been a long time coming, and Scottish Labour had been losing elections for years at local council, Scottish Parliament and European level. There was an alternative in Scotland in the SNP. It's not a good enough alternative, it's a narrow alternative, but there was an alternative. What we need to make sure is that we make the Labour Party the vehicle that will radically redistribute wealth and power throughout these islands. And united, I honestly believe we can do it. Thank you.